It is dominated by this contentious night at the tribunal. Just like so often last year, the dangerous tackle is again in the spotlight and the very fabric of the game has been called into question.
Oh, it's a tough one. I mean, I was right there as a player and I obviously didn't know the outcome of what happened to Duggan, but I thought it was the perfect tackle.
I just don't know anymore what to do, really. Like, it's very, very confusing. When I read last night that he got 3 weeks, I was honestly astonished.
What has happened to our great game? It's getting into troubling territory for me. It's just astonishing. I know where we're going as a game. We're trying to protect the head. But what in the hell is Toby Bedford meant to do? We are allowed to tackle in our game. And yes, I feel bad for Tim Torrento, but we are starting to eat into the fabric of the game.
That is a disgraceful suspension.
He got injured, so that's why he got 3 weeks.
The game is asking him to think, don't let him get away, but let go, so he's OK in less than a second. They are not robots.
In that situation, they want the player to release an arm in motion. That's hard to do without putting yourself at risk.
I'm telling you, mate, don't pursue and don't tackle in that situation. I'd rather have you playing for us instead of missing for the next 3 weeks.
And it's not one you see very often, and especially with that sort of contact with the ground.
I'm not seeing much driving from Charlie. If anything, it looks to me like he's being pulled to the ground.
It has got to the point where you can't win a contest by too much.
I'm all for really protecting the head, and the players are just going to have to deal with the outcome of the tackle, I guess.
And the real risk is they're asking him to get rid of it, make an attempt. And the only way you can do that is to try to kick it, which then puts the tackler in danger of a sling. So we're in a tough situation at the moment.
Robbo asked Scotty before whether players are not going to tackle. I worry whether players are going to go and pick the ball up.
I think that we're trying to legislate against incidental head contact and we're not going to eliminate head contact out of the game.
Concussion crusaders, be careful what you wish for. This is a crossroad moment.
It is a big backdrop for these two cases in particular tonight. So let's head to the tribunal. David Zita has sat through the Charlie Cameron case. Hello to you, David.
Hello, Gerard and Robbo again.
How has Cameron's fate landed?
Well, it hasn't landed well for him or the Brisbane Lions because he is going to miss the next 3 matches, barring another appeal from the Lions at the appeal board. So it has been upheld by the tribunal a short time ago. The tribunal said it was Cameron who took Liam Duggan to ground rather than the vice versa, which is what the Lions attempted to argue. They said it's the combination of excessive force used in driving Duggan backwards and having both of his arms pinned, which makes this conduct unreasonable in the circumstances. So that's where it landed. They said Duggan had no opportunity to protect himself in the circumstances. He was highly vulnerable. Cameron didn't exercise the appropriate duty of care. If he wasn't driven backwards with force or had an arm free, then he could have cushioned his landing. So you can see the incident here. That is what the tribunal has found after a pretty straightforward case from both sides, but ultimately Cameron missing the next 3 matches.
What did Charlie argue, David?
So Charlie Cameron said he was trying to execute a tackle as he normally would. This is how he's trained to tackle. This is everything. You put your head towards the player, you try and get in close and tight to them. This is everything by the letter of the law and how they are trained at training by the Lions. So he says it's Duggan that causes him to lose his footing when their feet tangle, and that's what causes the downward motion. It's actually Duggan who's contributing to it and rotating him and bringing him to ground rather than vice versa. So it really stemmed on which side of the argument the tribunal came down on. They found it was Cameron contributing to this rather than Duggan, and ultimately he said, I was trying to execute a tackle, that's my job, I did everything I was taught to do, therefore this shouldn't be a dangerous tackle because that's how we're taught to tackle.
Part of tonight is hearing what the AFL's prosecutor is suggesting the players should do as an alternative. Was that put forward?
Yeah, it was put forward. So look, they said that Cameron could have released Duggan's right arm as they began to fall. Also, alternatively, even before it got to that point, he could have tried to slow up the tackle as it became clear that they were probably starting to lean towards going to ground. That is what the AFL said could have happened. He could have attempted to slow momentum at the start, or he could have released the right arm as they began to fall. The Brisbane side of things obviously said that this was not something that would have made any material difference, and Cameron just wasn't expecting to fall because he wasn't expecting that leg to come across his. So the AFL says Duggan was vulnerable and he was driven to the ground with excessive force. 2 factors, they said, obviously constitute a dangerous tackle under the guidelines, and 2 factors the tribunal found to be the case.
How important was the discussion on the tangle of legs?
Yeah, it was important. That was where a lot of, I think, the disagreement centred. So the Cameron side of the Adrian Anderson for the Lions said that this was significant. He had his legs tangled. Had it not been for the legs being tangled, then this would have been a safe tackle. So Cameron couldn't have been expecting that. The AFL said it's not exceptional in these circumstances that someone's leg gets tangled with the other player's leg in a close-up tackle. So they were downplaying it. The Lions were certainly playing it up. Ultimately, it was found that Cameron didn't do enough in the circumstances and that the legs didn't really have too much of an impact on the case.
So they dismissed that completely, David, the tangle of legs?
Well, in their reasoning, yes. So they've said that this was something that ultimately Cameron didn't exercise his duty of care. He drove him to ground with excessive force. Had he not have done that, had he not pinned both arms, Duggan would have had more of a chance to protect himself. Regardless of how they went to ground, they said this collision, this landing was the result of someone being driven into the ground with excessive force.
All right, just stay there for a tick, David. How does that sit initially with you?
All these three cases we'll talk about. There's dilemmas everywhere, Gerard. I thought it was a reasonable case with the tangle of legs and just the motion of going to the ground, the weight of Duggan and the weight of Charlie Cameron. 3 weeks.
So you have to separate the 3 weeks out. You just have to focus on the guilty or not guilty, and then we can address the system later on.
No,
The
I don't
system's
think he's
not at
guilty.
trial
I
tonight.
don't think he's guilty. I think it. My gut feel is he's not guilty, but I understand why he is guilty. So I don't know what's more important.
Yeah.
The understanding or your instinct? What's the overriding?
Well, I think we lived through this right through last year as 32 players got suspended. This is incredibly hard to beat. It is incredibly hard to beat the dangerous tackle charge, and only a couple have been able to do it along the way.